It was suggested to me that I narrate this so that people can better understand what's going on. So this is a simple distillation. What we're trying to do is we're trying to extract the molecule that's responsible for the fragrance of these evergreen needles. These are fir needles, and I haven't yet identified what species of tree they're from, but it's some kind of fir, I believe. They have kind of a piney tangerine fragrance to them, like a Christmas tree would. And the basic process of this, or I guess I should first say that the molecule that's responsible for the fragrance is often found in the oil that can be separated from the plant. So a lot of the essential oils that have those fragrances have the molecules in them. They're a volatile molecule, they're easily evaporated, and because of that we can separate it. So what we'll do is I've got our sample of needles that have the fragrance in them, and I've got some water, probably like, I don't know, 150 milliliters of water in there. And then we'll apply heat, and as it begins to boil, the molecules will heat up and they will evaporate, I guess, before the other molecules in there would. So it will evaporate actually with the water, and it will condense. So it'll heat up, and actually you can see right now there's a little bit of condensation that's collecting on the flask. As that goes up, it will come into this part right here. And then down here, this part is called the condenser. And the condenser is actually cooler. Right now we have water. This is my little makeshift faucet that I have. I don't have one of those fancy, like, triangular things. Anyway, so I rigged up just a syringe. But that is pumping the water through here, and then it pushes it up through here, and it fills the whole condenser. And this condenser piece is actually made of two pieces of glass. There is one piece that you can see that spirals through, and then a second piece that acts as like a capsule around that, and that's what the water's contained in. So that keeps the inside cool, which is important because you got to remember this is going to be boiling water, so it's really hot. Even as it condenses from steam to a liquid, it's really hot. So if it weren't for that, we would probably lose a lot of our product just evaporating away with the water so quickly. So it cools down, and then it will, as it condenses in the condenser, it will drip down into this flask and we'll collect it again. Once that's finished, there will be a layer of water on top that contains the molecules that are responsible for the fragrance, and then a water/oil mixture which we call hydrosol. And what we'll do is we'll separate the hydrosol. Some people actually keep it. That's what rose water is, orange water. Some people actually use it in all sorts of different things. But for our purposes, we'll separate it because we don't need it. And we'll just save the oil. The oil will float on top because it's less dense. And how we'll separate it is we'll use this flask right here. So the shape of this flask makes it useful for separating things. So as you can see, it goes from large to small, and when we pour the mixture of oil and hydrosol in there, we'll let it settle, and then we'll drain it. This is all made of glass, so it's not reactive, but we'll turn this and it will start to drain, and as it begins to filter, we'll collect the hydrosol and we'll throw that away, but then the oil will become more concentrated, or maybe not more concentrated, but it will become easily visible as it's pushed into this smaller space. And then once we can tell that the oil is right about where the top of this valve is, we'll shut it off, we'll switch our flasks, and we'll collect the oil. I guess it should be noted, a lot of fragrant molecules are called terpenes, or the actual chemical structure is known as a terpene. So a lot of your fragrances for roses come from a terpene called geraniol, like geraniums, geraniol. The fragrance for citruses in oranges and lemons is called limonene, I actually did another video on that where we're isolating that from lemon peel, but that's a terpene. And I'm not sure about the chemical structure of this fragrance, whatever's in these pine needles or these fir needles, but I would imagine that they're probably pretty similar. It's probably a terpene. If not, we know it's highly volatile, and so it evaporates first, and that's how we can separate it. I'll go ahead and pause the video, and then we'll come back once we've got some more condensate. Okay, so now we're finally boiling pretty good, and we've got it hot enough that it's collecting a good amount of condensation in there, which is, as it's condensing, falling down into our collection flask, which it looks like we've collected, well, not even 10 milliliters, so it smells really good already though. So now we just wait, and it does take a while, and you have to be patient. I usually am able to collect around 100 or more. I usually just stop at around 100 when my beaker fills up, and then I'll separate it. But that's pretty much all there is to it. Now that it's hot enough, you just let it boil. You do not want to let all of the water boil out, as then you can really heat the glass and maybe damage it. So you want to keep some water in there. Don't let it all boil out. And mine's rumbling pretty good. So if you can see, I don't know if this will pick up on the camera. Let's see if I can focus. There we go. So you can kind of see the vapor is condensing a lot right there as it hits that cold water in the condenser. Kind of cool because it makes that little, almost like a mirage thing. But yeah, I'll shut this off and we'll come back once we've collected some more distillate. Okay, we're back and we've collected about 80 milliliters of distillate. So we're nearly there. That's pretty good. But, so we'll see how far we can go. I did have to refuel the stove, so I put some more alcohol in the spirit burner, and that helped out quite a bit just with the rate of evaporation, because it was starting to cool down a little bit, so that's a lot better. You can tell that the color of the needles has turned a lot more brown than they were. They were like a greener color when we started, so, and also that they are not floating up as much on top, so a lot of the oil content has been removed. So that's a way that we can tell that the process is almost complete. I'll probably run this for another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to separate it. Okay, we've collected just over 100 milliliters, and I've decided that's enough, so we're going to go ahead and collect it. I've turned off my spirit burner and capped it. For this part, if you have a pair of good gloves, so you don't contaminate the oil with the oils on your hands that would be mixing. So I'm going to try to do this with one hand. It's better if you have somebody to help you, because it can get a little tricky. But what we're going to do, I'm going to turn this off. We don't need that anymore. We're going to separate it now. So we're going to use this separating flask, and we're going to make sure that it's off so we don't lose everything. We're going to separate the hydrosol, because that's the part we don't want. We just want the oil with the fragrant molecules, the essential oil. So we've got our valve shut off. We have our Erlenmeyer flask to collect the hydrosol. And then it's a matter of just simply pouring it in. Now the oil has collected on the top, since oil floats, and that's the part we're trying to separate. So very carefully, I'm going to pour it in here. And I'm trying to watch this and pour at the same time. This could be like definitely a skill here. And doing so, after we're pouring this in, it's going to mix up the oil and the water a little bit. So you want to leave it in this flask for a little bit to let the oil molecules find themselves and the water to separate. And even just barely, or just recently, you can, or as soon as we pour it in, you can see the oil that's collecting on the top, and it's finding its way together. Molecules are nonpolar, so they bind with other nonpolar molecules, and they're collecting together. And once we've let that sit for a little bit, then we'll release that and we'll let it drain, and we'll collect that oil. So I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, we're back. I've actually replaced my Erlenmeyer flask for the beaker that we initially drained it in, because I noticed there's a little bit of oil still left in there. So since we're going to be doing this process a couple times, I figured we'd use that so that we can try to collect the oil that's in there as much as we can. So now what we're going to do, we're just going to open this valve. I'm going to zoom out so you can get most of this process. I'm going to open this valve and we're going to drain off that hydrosol. And we should be able to tell as we drain it. We'll be able to see the oil, which is the layer on top, as it starts to make its way down. This part you want to go slow, even slower if you're doing it one-handed like I am. Especially if you haven't collected a lot of oil, you don't want to lose any. So the hydrosol is just collecting down there. And as that oil makes its way down into the skinnier part of the flask, it will start to collect, and it's easier to see how much oil we've actually extracted. Okay, I'm going to try not to lose any oil here. Just by opening and closing it, okay. So we can see that the oil is sitting right above the flask, or right above the valve. I'm going to let out just the little bit of water that's separating it, and then we'll be ready to separate that or collect that oil. Not very much. You don't get very much of these unless you have a lot of product, or a lot of your initial. I've been studying chemistry tonight, so I'm thinking in reactants and products. You don't get a lot though unless you have a lot of starting material. That's what I mean. So we have a little bit of oil, or a little bit of water, that's just right at the very tip. I'm going to replace this and use my pipette to just suck out the little bit of water that we have remaining in here. That just goes in the sink, because what I want to collect is just pure oil. Okay. That actually works pretty good. This is the first time I've tried that, but that worked really well. Okay. Now we're ready to collect our little bit of oil that's left in there. So I've prepared ahead of time this bottle with what we've already collected in the past. And we'll just take the lid off. And let's see, I'm going to pause it real quick because I don't want to do this one-handed. I got to hold that bottle. Okay, hopefully you can see this. I'm trying to do it so you can see me actually collecting the oil. But we're just going to hold the bottle right underneath, and we're going to open the valve, and then the remaining oil that's on top should go right in. And that's all there is to it.